All right, well, welcome everybody to the 2024 California Climate Policy Summit. Let's give ourselves a hand. Woo! And I'm glad you all have a seat because we sold out this year. We had to turn away quite a few people, so we'll have to figure out how to deal with that next year. But here we are, and it's so great to all be together. I have a few housekeeping items before we jump into everything. One is that we are mask friendly. It's not required, but strongly support everyone who needs or wants to mask today. Also, has anybody downloaded the Hoover app? All right, cool. We may not use it again next year. It tends to want to email all of us all the time, even when we tell it not to. So something about AI, anybody hear of that? So anyway, the Hoover app will help us, and you can see all of the program on there. There is a Q&A function that we will not be using today. So if you put a question in there and you don't hear a response, you will not hear a response from us because we're not going to use it. We're going to do it the old-fashioned way. You have 3x5 cards and pens on your tables. You can fill that out, and we have some wonderful volunteers, Henry and Sarah, who are going to walk around and pick up the cards once we get going today. I also want to take a minute to acknowledge our fantastic sponsors. This day would not be possible without you. Our ticket prices did not cover the full cost of this event, and so we have to raise money separately, and we're so grateful. First, our number one sponsor is Sunrun, and Walker is somewhere in here. Thank you, Sunrun. Our next level supporters, Bay Area Quality Management District, MCE, San Jose Clean Energy, SMUD, Sacramento Municipal Utility District, Sonova. We have individual donors all together making this day possible. So if you have time during a break, please visit some of these, our sponsors and their tables out here. And really want to, again, anybody who is a sponsor in the room right now, want to raise your hand? Anybody here? Oh, there's one over there. Okay. Thank you so much. So thank you again all for being here today. It is fantastic to work together to collaboratively build power for accelerated equitable climate policy in California. We all know, as goes California, so goes, yes, the nation and the world. That was very good. Okay. The challenging thing is that the vital signs of planet Earth are doing pretty poorly right now. 2023 was the warmest year on record, with the last 12 months crossing a dangerous threshold, exceeding 1.5 C warming for the first time in human history. Well, really, for the first time on record since the industrial era. And just last Friday, carbon dioxide in the atmosphere was up to a record-breaking 428 parts per million for the first time in human history. When I was born, this will give away my age, but it was around 315 parts per million. I mean, that's how much things have changed and how much, in my lifetime, we've contributed to climate change. Sea surface temperatures are literally so warm that they are off the charts, and for so many months in a row that scientists are stunned. And we are fully in the sixth extinction caused by human activities, destroying species and habitats and whole ecosystems, which are essential to maintaining a living biosphere and to regulating our climate. We really are perilously close to triggering dangerous global tipping points. So you think about this last fall and what happened all over the world, all kinds of extreme events, from a hurricane over the Mediterranean, the super warm waters supercharging the storm system so that it flooded the agricultural areas of Greece and wiped out 2/3 of their crops. And then it moved over to Libya, and overnight, over 12,000 people were dead. And this is what we're talking about, where we have these weather extremes. And we're going to look back on 2023 as that was a pretty good time, unless we do a lot more action, a lot faster, a lot more equitably, and a lot sooner. So what we do here together today, here in Sacramento and across California, working together, is critical to ensure a climate-safe future for everyone. Now, our state decision makers are facing an interesting challenge. We have a budget deficit this year, and depending on who you talk to, it ranges from anywhere from 53 billion to 70-some billion. So a question for all of you. Are we spending enough on equitable climate solutions? No. I can't hear you. No, not at all. Have no doubt about it. And we know that not spending enough and that delaying action is actually costlier and deadlier for our communities. The governor's proposed budget includes cuts and deferrals in the climate budget of $4.7 billion. Is this okay? No, not at all. It's not acceptable. We need these investments and more to secure the vibrant, climate-safe future we all strive for. Protecting and growing the climate budget, the full climate budget that was signed into law in 2022, is critical. It's about investing for clean air that benefits everyone. It's about clean water. It's about food security and economic security and healthy ecosystems. It's about equity. It's about making sure that our frontline communities are better protected from worsening climate impacts and have access to climate solutions today. It's about the 7 million Californians that live within a mile of active oil and gas wells exposed to toxic pollution and carcinogens every single day. This is about ensuring a smooth and rapid transition to climate-friendly transportation and buildings that could save tens of billions of dollars through improved health and prevent thousands of deaths each year. It's literally a matter of life and death. So how do we protect this multi-year budget and climate investments that we so desperately need? One of the first things we need to do is to make sure that we aren't inadvertently or directly funding oil and gas through the budget, right? So what does that mean? We have to stop all state subsidies for big oil and stop any tax breaks. And we think we know some of them, and we know the ones we know of add up to maybe a few hundred million or maybe even some billion, but there are probably many, many more that are in there. We need to pick it apart, find it, and we need to stop funding big oil. The governor's budget has $22 million in proposed cuts to oil and gas subsidies. Not enough, is it? No, it's really tiny, and compared to a $200 billion budget. We need to make sure that the funds that the state expends, our tax dollars, are being used to support the transition to a clean and equitable energy future. And we have to end other dead-end investments like highway expansion funding. Should we be doing that in 2024? No, not at all. By doing that, we actually increase pollution and health impacts. It does nothing to relieve congestion, and it only makes our reliance on dirty, polluting technologies greater. So I don't know if any of you read the study that came out the other day, but it showed that California's emissions actually grew in 2021. And just to reach what I think of as our low bar goal of getting to 40% below 1990 level emissions by 2030, we now have to cut climate pollution 4.6% every year until 2030. And the longer we wait, the more we're going to have to do each year to sustain a healthy climate for everyone. So not only must we preserve a historic climate budget and actually add to it, we have to do even more. We have to take on big oil. And think about it. I mean, California is known as the environmental state. When I travel outside the state, and I'm sure this is true for all of you, or when we've gone abroad to the UN climate meetings, people look at us from California like rays are emanating from our heads. It's like, oh, California. But we know that California has a dark side. And California is the third largest refinery state in the nation and the sixth largest producer of crude oil. Big Oil spent $27 million on lobbying just in 2023. And what were they lobbying against? Everything that we're working for. So it's time to turn that around. They keep profiting from producing and polluting and pushing these false climate solutions like carbon capture and storage. Boo is right. What should they be doing? They should be closing and sealing the 40,000 idle wells across the state that are spewing methane every day. They should be helping workers transition to climate-friendly jobs. They should be part of a managed transition to a managed decline of the fossil fuel industry in a way that ensures we can provide new opportunities for all of these workers and protect consumers. We know how to do all of this. We just need the political will. And as we move to electrify everything, we can deploy more clean energy faster, including supporting local clean distributed energy. And that means for our friends at the CPUC, I had to just call out my friend over here, that we need to do much more to support distributed energy resources. And one way we can do that, there are many ways to do it, but one way that we are championing is to ensure that every electric vehicle, every electric school bus in California has bi-directional charging capabilities. We're really grateful to Senator Skinner for running this bill. And just think about it. So intermittent energy like solar and wind can be stored in EV batteries and discharged when needed to power our homes and businesses when electricity goes out, and provide power back to the grid when there's higher than usual demand like major heat waves. And it reduces pollution from gas-powered peaker plants in frontline communities. So today, we have 1.8 million EVs on the road. That means that if you had all of those batteries filled to capacity with energy, it would equal roughly 18 gigawatts of storage. So most of us, I can say, for me, what is a gigawatt? I can't tell you exactly. But what I do know is that our single biggest source of electricity, the Diablo Canyon nuclear plant, at its maximum output produces 2.2 gigawatts. We have 18 gigawatts of storage in our EVs today, and by 2030 we'll have 80 gigawatts. It's incredible. So we really have to use this resource to help make a stable grid and to help power our future as we move to electrify everything. And when you have a break, go outside and see Kurt's electric car actually charging a refrigerator. Other priorities that you'll want to look about today and consider, I'm going to go through these really fast. One of the things we've learned this past year is that we can pass bills, and as hard as it is to pass a bill, we also have to be sure it gets funded and implemented. So there are two bills that we all worked really hard to pass last year, SB 253 and 261 for corporate climate accountability. Let's fund those and let's implement them. Thank you, Senators Weiner and Stern. We need to enact SB 252, thank you, Senator Gonzalez, to divest billions of public employee and teacher retirement funds from fossil fuels. We need to stop the revolving door that allows workers who work for the CPUC and the CEC to then work for the very businesses that they're regulating. And that's Assembly Bill 2054, Assemblymember Bauer-Kahn. We have to stop allowing ratepayer dollars to be used for lobbying against ratepayer and climate interests. Senator Min's bill, SB 938. And we need to enact other legislation that unlocks more resilient and reliable clean energy, like Assemblymember Friedman's bill 2256, that will keep rooftop solar growing by establishing the true value of rooftop solar, including all of its environmental and societal benefits like local clean air, clean water, and energy resilience. Thank you, Assemblymember Friedman. And Mr. Connolly's bill it's AB 3107, that would explicitly clarify that microgrids are not electrical corporations and not subject to CPUC oversight, so microgrids can actually cross the street and just be approved by local authorities. You know, Assemblymember Hart has AB 1499 that would require that California's largest oil operators would have to plug 20% of the idle wells every year. That's going to be critical to helping to slow down climate change as we work to reduce methane in the atmosphere. We have to ensure, finally, that big oil's lies do not prevent the ability to establish health and safety zones around the wells, and we actively support the ballot measure to keep the law the legislature passed. So, remember, the scientific prescription for getting back to a safe and stable climate is we have to cut emissions in half by 2050, and we have to draw down hundreds of millions of tons of past climate pollution that's already in the atmosphere. It's a huge amount of carbon to remove. It's going to take all the tools we have, and we have to use them in an equitable and environmentally and appropriate way. But nature-based sequestration is the first step here through healthy soils management and climate-friendly habitat restoration. As Carl Sagan beautifully wrote, when looking at a photo of the Earth from deep space, if you look at it, you see a dot. That's here, that's home, that's us. On it, everyone you ever heard of, every human being who ever lived out their lives. In all this vastness, there's no hint that help will come from elsewhere to save us from ourselves. It is up to us to deal more kindly and compassionately with one another and to preserve and cherish this pale blue dot, the only home we've ever known. Together we can win. Thank you all. Yeah, I know. We have some fantastic speakers today, and we're excited for your questions and for your engagement in all of this. But I'm really pleased to introduce our next speaker, who I want to invite him up, Mr. Albert Titman Jr. He is from the Nisenan, Miwok, Maidu, and Madesi band, and my apologies if I'm mispronouncing it. Please come on up. Yeah, please give him a warm hand while I introduce him.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's totally okay.
So I'll read a little of your bio.
Okay.
Okay. And so Mr. Titman was raised on his traditional homelands of Sacramento, and we are honored to be here today. He has cultivated a deep foundation as a culture bearer. His motivation to continue this work stems from his love of his people and this land. For the past 6 years, Mr. Titman has worked closely with the Native American Graves and Repatriation Act. He has represented multiple local tribes in ensuring that sacred sites were protected and advocated for old sacred objects and ancestral remains to be given back to its original people. So please again join me in welcoming Mr. Albert Titman.
Thank you for that. Majuxis Kuchi Hema Kaniasis Albert Titman. I'm Tumale Nisenan, Miwok, Maidu, Madesi Band, Pit River, and my grandmother is a descendant from what is now known as Mexico. I'm honored to be here. Where we're on right now, what I like to say is that legally occupied territory known as Sacramento, California, was once the original homelands to the Maidu, Miwok, and Nisenan people. And through their stewardships and through their relationship with Mother Nature, the land, as they were ecological people or regional people, the original people from the area, regionally, as they took care of Mother Earth in a great way, took care of them back. So with that being said, I just want to make sure I honor the local tribes here, Shingle Springs, Woodland Rancheria. They're two of the federally recognized tribes in the local Sacramento area. And I just want to, I'm going to open it up and close it like this. In the same way that we open our ceremonies up with, we always open it up with an honoring song, a blessing song. And that just helps simply get everybody grounded, help everybody get centered. And it also helps us as people acknowledge those original ancestors of this land, and it's calling them in to be here with us today in a good way, always. So I'm going to start it off with a tuta, and in our language that means blessing. Oh. Hele ha hele 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 ha hele 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 ha hele 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 ha hele hele hone wale yo wa hele you am a ho hele ha hele hele ha hele hele ha hele hele ha hele hele Hele, 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 Holy, 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 you am a ho, Hele, 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 ho, hey, ho. And I know that while the natives had carefully stewarded their natural environment through hunting, fishing, burning, forest burning, field cleansing, and using plants for nutritional and medicinal purposes, the Europeans dramatically reshaped America's nature, rivers, lakes, oceans to obtain lumber, gold, land, and to establish farms. And from a native perspective, all of our creation stories, no matter where you look at, from the mountains to the hills, all the way to across the other side of the country, that all of our creation stories goes back from the eagle, the animals of coming from the earth. No matter what, the natives in any region of the United States, they had a direct relationship that nobody else, a lot of people couldn't have or feel with Mother Nature, with Mother Earth. And in return, while the natives also took care of Mother Earth, like I always like to mention, Mother Earth always took care of us in the right way. And I want to end like that. I want to say, Wile Matakmu, that simply means in my language, which is the Northern Sierra language, it means from my heart to your heart. Oh.
Thank you so much, Albert Titman. Really appreciate that. Okay, our next speaker is the speaker, and he has just arrived, so he will be in here shortly. But while we are waiting for him, I will introduce him. Speaker Rivas represents the Salinas area. He was raised in Piscinas, California, where his grandfather was a farm worker. As a child, Rivas watched his grandfather stand side by side with Cesar Chavez and the UFW as a leader in the fight to win equal rights and fair contracts for farm workers. Speaker Rivas brings this incredible and invaluable perspective to his assembly leadership. I personally had the pleasure of working with Speaker Rivas in 2022 when he was chair of the Agricultural Committee on AB 1757, a bill that he co-authored, requiring state agencies to set ambitious targets for natural carbon sequestration and other natural climate solutions. In his first session as a newly minted speaker, he played a key role in passing some historic climate legislation, and he attended the UN's global climate meeting, COP28, in Dubai. It was really an inspiration to have the leader of our assembly on the global climate stage, and we were glad to be there with him in Dubai. So thanks so much to the speaker. He is not in here yet. I see Mark going like this, so I have to keep talking. Well, you know, I do want to share a little story with you, and then when the speaker comes in. But when I was talking about extreme climate events, I was in New York City at the end of September. My sister, very sadly, my baby sister, is facing end-of-life issues. And I have gone back quite a bit to New York City to help her. And we were driving from Lower East Side up to the hospital where she was being treated. On the last Friday of September, there were 7 inches of rainfall in about 5 hours. And it was one of the most frightening experiences I have ever personally had, not just for my own well-being. It was really scary. Like, I didn't think we would make it. I understand it in a snowstorm, in a blizzard, but in rainfall, I had never experienced anything like that. And I just kept thinking of, how can I help my sister if we flood out and the car stops? And I just realized then that whatever community we live in, climate can impact you. And it can happen in very surprising ways. So again, the work that we do is more important than ever. So now I'm very pleased to welcome the Speaker of the Assembly and a true climate champion, Speaker Rivas. Let's give him a very warm welcome. Thank you so much.
I apologize, I'm here a little bit late. I'm out of breath. I started working out again in the morning because I don't fit into any of my suits. And so my wife won't let me buy any other ones. But it is wonderful, wonderful to be here this morning. I appreciate the introduction. And it really is inspiring to start the day with all of you. You know, our Golden State's leaders on climate action. And no one appreciates your work more than I. You know, I consider myself an environmentalist, not because the environment's important, but because when I was first elected at the local level, this is I think my 14th year in elective office. I spent 8 years in this small county of San Benito as a county supervisor. And when I ran in 2010, I didn't talk about the environment. I hiked and I cared about the environment, but in terms of how important it was as even a local elected official on the actions we can take to protect our environment for future generations is something that I learned very quickly as a local elected official, and was proud to lead the very first and I think only a ban on fracking through the initiative process in our small county in San Benito. And the reason being because I learned firsthand that fracking is not a healthy thing for our environment. And so I mobilized and put my words into action. But with that, I've always valued climate policy. I've always valued our environment. It's always been a cornerstone and so important to the foundation of the work I do here in the legislature as chair of agriculture and in prioritizing this thing called natural working lands that I learned all about at the climate change conference. I believe it was COP 24, one of those. It was in Spain, where I learned all about the opportunities when it comes to carbon sequestration, not by engineering carbon sequestration, but by doing it naturally, by how we work our lands. And so certainly, appreciate all of you who envision a greener California. A greener California is a dream that we all share and that we must all share. A California in a world that is fueled by 100% renewable and sustainable energy. One where we protect and sustain our natural working lands, as I mentioned, and where our most vulnerable communities are safe from climate whiplash. When I walked in, I heard the comments of flooding and impacts to some communities. And each one of us has witnessed or we have experienced firsthand the critical impacts related to climate whiplash that those impacts can have on our lives. Where summers are much, much warmer, much hotter. I am a lifelong resident of the district and region I live in now, a community of Hollister, and again, San Benito County. It's warmer now than it has ever been that I can remember as a child. Our winters are bringing unprecedented rains. I just learned what atmospheric rivers were just a few years ago. I didn't know they were a thing. And now we're experiencing them year after year. And our wildfires are certainly more extreme. In the district I represent along the central coast of the Monterey Bay, massive, massive flooding from extreme winter storms forced working class families in the community of Pajaro to evacuate. And when I say working class families, I'm talking about our most vulnerable residents, farm workers. And I can relate because I come from a family of farm workers. I grew up in a migrant farm worker labor camp. And so I saw the displacement of people in that community who are still trying to recover. When we get there, the media said, about 2,000, 3,000 residents, individuals were displaced. It was more like 5,000 residents were displaced because of the critical overcrowded housing problem we have. When you have 3 or 4 families living in substandard housing, just to afford a roof over their head, it's a problem. And is directly impacted by our climate, as we have witnessed. It is a community that is still trying to recover. And I found myself asking myself over and over the last year, What washes away when our levees break? What washes away is our stability, the safety, and opportunity. And just ask the many, many families and residents who put their lives on hold just about over a year ago. I've told the story of a young teenager from the community there in Pajaro. Her name is Denia Scutia. And she'd been accepted to UCLA before the flooding. That is a big, big deal, coming from a migrant farm-working family. The first generation going to higher education, an institution like UCLA. Life-changing opportunity for her and her family. But after the flooding in the community, her family was displaced. She decided to defer her acceptance so she could stay at home and work and support and help her family. And her story is unfortunate. It breaks my heart. And it's a choice that no young person should have to make. And that is why, as Speaker, I have made climate action and climate resiliency one of my top priorities. And I believe that together we can overcome the challenges of climate change because the world looks to California as a climate leader here in America, as a worldwide climate leader. And so we must continue to lead, especially when other states are not. States like Texas and Florida, especially when Donald Trump is on the ballot, we have to continue to lead when it comes to the climate. We must lead in protecting our natural working lands and managing their use wisely and equitably to meet our carbon reduction goals. California, as a state, we've adopted some of the most stringent and innovative methane reductions in the country and regulations to reduce emissions. We are conserving and converting more and more working and natural lands to sequester carbon, as I mentioned in my opening. California has made significant progress toward a greener, more environmentally just future, and we must continue to do more if we are to remain the vanguard state when it comes to climate policy. And living up to the Climate Center's vision for bold and equitable climate policy is only possible. It's only possible through collaboration and through some determination. And that's the work that you all do. The road ahead is long, and we need to be thoughtful on how to ensure our path toward clean air, clean water, and clean transportation, one that is sustainable and equitable. And I have to mention housing here. I happened to read, when I was trying to gobble down my breakfast this morning, I happened to read an article in Cal Matters about Coastal Commission, about how a lot of laws are been proposed to impact the Coastal Commission. They mentioned me in that article. They mentioned the Chair of Natural Resources, Isaac Bryan, saying that Assemblymember Bryan is favorable towards housing policy. I'm favorable towards housing policy as well. And I'm just stating the obvious when we need to build more housing for residents who desperately need it, but not at the expense of the coast. Not at the expense, and I mentioned Isaac Bryan, because Isaac, we don't want to ruin our coastline. But every region, every part of the state needs to play a role in meeting our climate goals, meeting our housing goals. And that does mean working with the Coastal Commission to build housing on the coast. And I mention that because I represent part of the coast. Prior to redistricting, I represented Big Sur. Residents who work low-wage jobs in the hospitality industry were driving over 100 miles to work in Big Sur because there was no housing. Low-income and middle-income families shouldn't have to live long distances from where they work just to afford a roof over their head. They endure hours and hours of traffic congestion, which just adds to our climate problems with this growing footprint when it comes to our transportation sector. Housing should be a human right, as I've mentioned. Must be a human right. And if California's leaders come together, if interest groups would for once abandon their biased rhetoric and come together to talk about this problem constructively, to fix our housing system, our broken housing system here in California, millions of residents, children, future generations would no longer have to suffer the indignities of an outdated and cruelly unjust system of housing in California. Not at the expense of the coast, but the Coastal Commission is part of the solution, and they cannot act like they are not. And so with that, thank you for having me. I look forward to working with all of you. And as I've mentioned, when it comes to climate, it is a top priority of mine, but it must be a top priority of every resident in the state because we have too much to lose as a state and as a country. Thank you all so much.
Thank you. Are you able to stay for a couple minutes for some questions?
Sure.
Okay. Is this on? Hello? No. Okay. Hello? It's on. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. But just, if it's okay, we'd love to ask a couple questions and some of the policies that we've already been talking about this morning before you arrived. One question we have for you is, how can we help you and your leadership in the Assembly to ensure that critical clean air and equity investments in the budget are not the first thing that are cut?
Yeah, so, advocacy is always very, very important. So excited that you all are here in Sacramento, and it does make a difference. Strategically engaging with members of the legislature, this is such a large state, as we know. The interests of this state, the differences that, what makes this state so great is our diversity. I've said it many times, I'm proud to be a speaker and a leader in this state and in this legislature. That's the diverse legislative body anywhere in the world. But with that, the differences, there's so many Democrats, which is a good thing, but the climate issues and impacts in San Francisco are much different than the climate issues and impacts in Bakersfield in the Central Valley. And so trying to organize regionally and having a very strategic approach, and that's why I'm one to always preach and encourage collaboration. It's at the federal level, the state level, but really at the local level as well. These local climate action plans can truly make a difference in moving our communities forward when it comes to safeguarding residents against heat, against flooding, against atmospheric rivers, against wildfires. It really takes all of us, and where the state can play a greater role in making those critical investments and encouraging these local leaders to take meaningful climate action. And that starts with all of you and having that engagement. In any way we can help, we're happy to do so.
Thank you very much. Well, we want to support you in especially the Assembly and making sure we have open discussion about how the budget goes forward this year. And another question I have for you is about the bonds. And you've been an incredible leader on natural and working lands, and we're really grateful. What is your hope for how we might get additional funding that's so desperately needed?
Well, I think, my philosophy on bonds is one where, it's an opportunity to make very critical investments to infrastructure, meaningful investments that will have wide benefits to a maximum number of residents. These are critical investments we're asking taxpayers to make. And so certainly with that in mind, is we have to be very prepared, not to mention, is watching these returns from last week's election. Prop 1 was the only statewide measure, and it's narrowly, on its way to victory when we didn't expect that. And so turnout, and really, what I attribute that to is nobody but just the low level of turnout. And so any bonds we move forward, especially in the climate space, we've got to be very organized and intentional and have a really strategic message to voters. And it's incumbent on us to ensure that turnout is up. I'm optimistic it's November. It's a completely new ball game, and hope that residents would turn out. And because of that, we have to be very intentional and, again, strategic in what bonds we move forward, because these could be meaningful and lasting investments that we as a state desperately need, especially in face of a staggering budget deficit.
That's great. Thank you. So we need to organize and get people out to vote and support
mobilize.
Our leaders in the Assembly. Let's give a warm applause again of gratitude to Speaker Rivas. Great, that was fantastic. One more hand for the Speaker of the Assembly, Robert Rivas. Great. I see that there are some of you standing in the back. Everybody's coming in from that side, but there are a number of seats still available over here, so just come on in and make yourselves at home. All right, that was great. Thank you again, Mr. Rivas. Our first plenary panel this morning is focused on a managed transition towards a fossil fuel phase-out. Extracting, refining, and using fossil fuels threatens public health on a daily basis, as I talked about earlier. In this panel, we're going to discuss the challenges that policymakers must overcome to adopt a comprehensive, coordinated, equity-centered, and worker-friendly transition away from fossil fuels in California. So I want to welcome up our next panel. So come on up. We have Drew Bohan, Executive Director of the California Energy Commission, Le-Quyen Nguyen, Deputy Secretary for Energy at CNRA, and our panel moderator, Dr. Catherine Garoupa. Let's give them a warm hand of welcome. Remember to use the cards on your table to write any questions that you have for this panel, and our volunteers will come around and pick it up. Just really briefly, I wanted to introduce Dr. Garoupa, who I have great admiration for. She is the Executive Director of the Central Valley Air Quality Coalition, CVAC, and co-chair of the Air Resources Board Environmental Justice Advisory Committee. We're grateful to have you on there. And at CVAC, Dr. Garoupa has spearheaded policy advocacy for clean air in the San Joaquin Valley. She has 15 years of experience winning collaborative campaigns, such as the incorporation of near roadway air monitoring requirements into the National Ambient Air Quality Standards for Particle Pollution. Go, Catherine. Thank you so much, and here's to our panel. Please, another hand. Go on.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Ellie, for that kind introduction, and to the Climate Center for putting this event together. As Ellie mentioned, CVAC works alongside our members in the San Joaquin Valley, which, in case you haven't heard our terrible reputation, we are the most polluted place in the nation for fine particles, and one of the most polluted for ozone, resulting in a decades-long public health crisis. And the root cause of these pollutants, both greenhouse gases and air pollution, are development, oil, and agriculture. Particularly, the southern San Joaquin Valley has tens of thousands of oil wells and some of the most productive and oldest oil fields. We are ground zero for climate impacts. So eager to be in conversation today with our two panelists. Undersecretary of Energy at the California Natural Resources Agency, Le-Quyen Nguyen, and Drew Bohan from the California Energy Commission. So again, want to echo Ellie's call. If you all have questions, we'd like to take a question or two from the audience at the end. We will start out with a couple of kind of big picture questions for the panelists. So first, I wanted to ask the panelists to introduce themselves, including a little bit about how they got to their current role, and we'll start with Le-Quyen.
Thank you, Catherine. Good morning, everybody. So happy to be here and to be spending some time with you. And just want to give another thank you to the Climate Center for putting on the summit and for inviting me to participate. So as Catherine mentioned, my name is Le-Quyen Nguyen. I'm the Deputy Secretary for Energy at the California Natural Resources Agency. And at our agency, we have over 26 different departments, conservancies, and commissions underneath our umbrella. And together, we lead efforts to restore, protect, and manage California's natural environment, as well as to advance work on California's key climate and energy policies. So in my role as Deputy Secretary for Energy, I provide oversight and support for all of the energy work that's happening at the energy agencies within our umbrella. So it's quite a lot of topics. It's anything from clean energy to carbon neutrality to oil and gas. So that's just a quick overview of our work. And then how I got to this role. It's interesting when I think about it. I actually never thought I'd be working in energy. When I go back to high school, college, I thought I'd actually be in the health sciences field, maybe retail pharmacist, doing something with microbiology. So it's odd to think of myself here now working in energy. But things change as you go through life, and as I started down that path for becoming a retail pharmacist, I thought, this isn't for me. And so I ended up at the state. And I actually came from the Energy Commission. They were the first state agency that I interviewed for, and I spent most of my career there actually before moving to the Resources Agency. So when I joined the Energy Commission, I was working on a solar incentive program, and it was for residential new construction, so putting solar, new residential construction, both single-family homes and affordable family homes, or multifamily units. And I thought, people are nice here, and this is interesting, so I'll give it a try. And I loved it. I absolutely loved the work, and I thought it was just so interesting to be working on something that I could actually see the impacts of. I could see it actually happening in real life. And it was just so cool to me because it's something that has like a real life application, something that we all hopefully live in a home or some sort of building, and we're all using energy. And I just thought it was just the best thing to be working on something that I could actually be involved with and actually, impacts like our everyday life. And so I made a few other career or job changes at the Energy Commission before ending up at the Resources Agency. And when I think back, like what has been the common factor with all of those moves? Why did I end up at the Resources Agency? It all comes back to, I loved the job. The work was interesting, and I really wanted to work in energy. But each time I got to this point where I thought, I know what I'm doing here. I've got this. And then each time I had this odd thing where I had this feeling like I need to do more. I need to push myself to do more. I need to both grow from a job skill perspective, but then I also want to be a bigger part of the solution. And again, for me, just energy being so integrated in all of our daily lives and everything that we're doing, I wanted to have a bigger voice in how energy policy actually gets implemented in California. And similar to many of all of you who are here, who I'm sure are very interested in the clean energy transition, like I wanted my voice to be part of that conversation. I wanted to help shape how energy policy gets implemented in California, and that's how I ended up here at the Resources Agency.
Thank you, Catherine. Thank you, Climate Center. I was minding my own business in Santa Barbara 20 years ago this month when I got asked to join the Schwarzenegger administration as a deputy secretary at Cal EPA. My first reaction was, why the heck would they want somebody like me? I was running a nonprofit where we enforced the Clean Water Act. Our tagline was, we sue polluters. So I joined, and 20 years later, I'm still in state service. I've been in a number of different agencies. The last 13 I've spent at the Energy Commission. The first 6 were as chief deputy, and the last 6 plus, I've been the executive director. It's great to be here.
Thank you, Drew. That's a great tagline. At CVAC, we like to advocate and work with agencies, but sometimes we realize we also have to sue polluters too, so definitely in solidarity with that. So we know at this point that global warming is caused by burning fossil fuels, duh. You all sit at really important agencies that have a critical role to play in a just transition. So from where you sit, what are some of the greatest challenges and opportunities to a phase out of fossil fuels, especially in a way that reduces burdens and increases benefits for environmental justice communities?
Okay, I guess I'll start. Biggest challenges. So when we think about it, the fossil fuel industry has been in California for over 100 years. So it's pretty much entrenched in our daily lives. It's used in a variety of applications in our lives. And so when we think about the biggest challenge, for me, it's finding pragmatic solutions to unwind that over 100 years of fossil fuel industry in our daily lives, finding solutions to address, how we're going to transition away from the fossil fuel and transition away from fossil fuels while also reducing impacts on middle and low-income families, finding ways to do this in an orderly fashion, as well as thinking through, similar to what the speaker mentioned earlier, there are so many different regions in California, and there's so many differing perspectives and different needs. So how are we going to do this transition in a way that accounts for all of these different needs, perspectives? And the other thing is just time. We do need to move quickly. We do need to move decisively on this, but it also needs to be done in a thoughtful way. And these are some of the things that I've heard already this morning is these things around, a thoughtful, managed transition, a phase out, so affordable, equitable. So again, doing this in a way that we're not creating these unintended consequences, agreeing on, yes, there does need to be a phase out from fossil fuels, but what is the timing of this? It does need to be done quickly, but again, we still need to think through all of the different pieces that need to be happening, all of the ecosystems, all of the structures, infrastructure that need to be in place so that this can be done right and, most importantly, in an affordable, equitable way.
Well, as most of you probably know, energy consumption and production are together by far the biggest greenhouse gas producers. If we don't get this right, the rest of our efforts aren't going to matter a whole lot. So at the Energy Commission, our North Star is SB 100. You also all probably know that this bill was passed several years ago, and it aims at achieving 100% of retail. Oops, lost power. Switch over. Getting our electricity 100% from clean resources. And so we've been working on this project now for some years. Our first report came out in 2021, and it made two really major findings. The first is, this is achievable. We can do this. In fact, we don't need any technological breakthroughs. We have the technology now to achieve our goals. Now we're investing about $100 million a year in energy research, and we're going to find faster, better, cleaner ways to do it, but we don't need to, strictly speaking. The second thing was, we're going to need to build like we have never built before. This is an enormous task that we have at hand. The second version of the report, we have to update it every 3 years, we're working on it now, it's due at the end of this year, is going to look at where we're going to put all this. And that's a big challenge. Second thing I want to point to is ZEVs. We're all in on ZEVs at the Energy Commission. The Air Resources Board focuses on the vehicles and incentives for vehicles and getting them out there. As Ellie pointed out, we're approaching 2 million ZEVs in California. About a million of those are battery electric vehicles. And as she also pointed out, at a million battery electric vehicles, that's about 10 gigawatts of power. The CAISO's max load is about 50. So right now we can supply 20% of our load for short periods of time, but that's when it's critically needed, just with the electric vehicles that are sitting idle 90% of their time. So there's some exciting possibilities, I think, that are out there. And then I just want to talk about what we're trying to do about making sure that this transition is equitable. And we could talk for a long time on this, but want to point to a few things. First, we listen and we learn. And I've had personally brilliant ideas that I've then taken public comment on, and the brilliant ideas weren't so brilliant after all. So we're learning a lot from the communities where the impacts are really taking place the most, and we're trying to be nimble and adaptable. We've invested to date $1 billion in disadvantaged communities. And today, all of our funding programs have a certain percentage of the funding that's tagged to benefit or be invested in or benefit disadvantaged communities. The numbers vary depending on the program. We have about $10 billion right now that we're investing, and it varies widely what the percentages are. But the low end is about 30% of the funds go to DACs, up to 100%. We also just recently, and I'll close here, took on a proceeding where we're going to look at non-energy benefits. A bunch of environmental groups and EJ groups appealed to us and filed a petition saying, we don't believe the state's doing a good enough job of measuring non-energy benefits, NEBs, and factoring them into the decision making. And my bosses, I served 5 bosses on the Energy Commission, said, you're right. We need to do a better job. So we're opening a proceeding to look at how do we work these sorts of things into cost effectiveness. We do it some throughout the state, but we can really do a better job. How do we work it into the DNA of all the work we do? So I'm excited about addressing these challenges.
Thank you both for sharing. So just a quick friendly reminder to the audience, we do have a volunteer going around picking up cards. If you have questions that you want to pitch, clearly cannot commit to getting to all of them, but would love to incorporate some questions that you all have. And also just to mention, we have limited time on this panel, so obviously we can only really touch the tip of the iceberg on these topics, and there is also a panel discussion this afternoon on a just transition, so invite people to continue the conversation there. So now that we've covered some of the big picture, I wanted to take the opportunity to dive a little bit more deeply into roles that you each play specifically at your agency and some of the things that you oversee. So Le-Quyen, I was hoping that you could spend a little bit of time talking about the importance of the methane task force, and also I know in your role you oversee the California Geologic Energy Management Agency, formerly DOGGR, who, while 1137 is on hold now, hopefully, if we are successful on the ballot in the fall, you all will be tasked with helping implement health and safety buffer zones around oil and gas wells. So if you could touch on those 2 priorities, that would be great.
Yeah, thank you, Catherine. So the Methane Task Force, it's a partnership between CalGEM, which does oil and gas regulation in California, as well as CARB, or California Air Resources Board, California Environmental Protection Agency, as well as the CNRA, or my agency. So with this partnership, we're trying to basically engage with the public on our efforts to reduce methane emissions from existing oil and gas or new oil and gas. And so through this partnership, we have regular meetings with the public where we share some of our efforts to both seek feedback on these efforts, as well as to help engage the public and just increase public participation and awareness of these efforts. And the Methane Task Force is not the venue where you actually participate in these specific actions or proceedings, but it's more, again, just to raise awareness, share that information, and then point you to other places where you can provide more specific information. So, for example, one of the things that we highlighted through the Methane Task Force last year, which was actually one of the things that, Ellie kind of touched on a need for, was we initiated our state abandonment efforts. So as Ellie mentioned, we have thousands of orphan wells. I think we've counted at least 5,300 potentially orphan wells in California. That means that there's no financially solvent operator there, and so it falls to the state to plug and abandon those wells. And so using state funding as well as federal funding, we are working to begin those efforts to plug and abandon those wells. And through the Methane Task Force, we help to highlight that effort, as well as, again, seek additional public comment and get feedback on which wells should we be targeting, which should be at our priority list. The money that we have is not going to plug and abandon all of those 5,300 wells, but it's a good start. And so where should we be prioritizing our efforts? And so we're prioritizing disadvantaged communities, or those wells that are the closest to sensitive receptors, but all of that happened with input from the public and community engagement. So again, that's the benefit of the Methane Task Force. And then, Catherine, you mentioned the setbacks, or 1137, and I can't, because it's the subject of a referendum, I can't get too into detail on that. But we put a lot of work into the setbacks. So basically what 1137 does is it establishes a health protection zone around sensitive receptors. So it's within 3,200 feet of a school, a home, daycare, even a park, places where people are. So setting that buffer or safety zone around those sensitive receptors, so no new oil and gas drilling could occur there. Or if there was existing oil and gas drilling, they would have to implement additional measures. So that is a really important effort for us in terms of protecting communities and also holding, I think, oil accountable for ensuring that they have safe operations. This will be a managed transition. This is not going to be something that we can do overnight. We can't flip the switch, turn off oil and gas. None of us are ready for it. We need to make sure that we all have access to electric vehicles, that we can all, have access to charging, reliable charging, and quick charging that it's close to our homes. And so until that happens, we need to work on a managed transition, but that doesn't mean that we can't hold oil and gas accountable for ensuring that their operations are safe. So to me, the buffer or the health protection zone is a really important step in that direction. And based on whatever happens later this year, we will be ready to implement 1137 if the voters vote to keep it. We'll be ready to implement, and we are taking other actions though to also address emissions from existing oil and gas facilities. So there are additional efforts that we'll be rolling out in our next Methane Task Force meeting later this year. So in the first half of this year, we'll have another one. We'll identify additional measures for example, measuring fugitive methane emissions from oil and gas wells. So would appreciate input on that as well in terms of what we should be measuring for, what should be considered critical versus not critical. But, yeah.
Thank you, Le-Quyen, for sharing that. And CVAC was a proud early supporter of the campaign for health and safety buffers. And I just have to share that when we first started, so many people told us that it would never happen. But we were really lifting up the voices of our community members who live next to oil and gas wells that are found to be leaking constantly, who have endured the impacts of having their kids go to school, living and working and playing next to leaking oil infrastructure that many times they can't even trace who the operator is. So I think, that was maybe 6 years ago, and it really shows how far we've come and the power of the people, that when we listen to the most impacted community members and uplift their asks and protections for them, that we can go much further than people ever actually estimated that we could. So if anybody ever doubts you when you're starting these just transition campaigns, be confident in the fact that when you're doing grassroots and grounded work, you will go far and you will be successful, because we really need these protections. And as the speaker said, don't forget to turn out and vote, and get all of your friends to vote too, so we can make sure we get that ballot initiative through. So the next question we'll turn to Drew, and then obviously Le-Quyen, if you would like to weigh in. We probably have time for 1 or 2 more questions before we wrap. So I am taking a question from the audience. Thank you, audience, for participating. How can we redesign the grid to better make use of distributed energy, microgrids, and rooftop solar? So Drew, if you could start us off.
Well, that's an easy one. Well, this is a great question, and something we've been looking at for a long time. So I mentioned energy research earlier. We have funded, I think, over 30 microgrids around the state. We've tried all different combinations. Obviously, a definition of a microgrid depends a lot on who you ask. You can ask 10 experts and get a dozen answers. But the essential components, renewable generation, storage, and some kind of brain are generally the common elements. So I'm personally bullish on it. The complaint about them is they're expensive. And depending on how you look at it, they are. Certainly first cost is expensive, but if you look at some of the non-energy benefits that we're looking at, if you look at the reliability in particular that microgrids can provide, I think they've got a bright future. So we're continuing to explore and try to build a better mousetrap, and I hope we're successful.
Well, thank you, Drew, for being so concise with that. That might give me room to squeeze in a couple more questions. So one that I know we had a robust dialogue on our prep call, because this is a sticky one. So again, feel free to touch on it where you feel comfortable. But in the San Joaquin Valley, along with historical legacy issues with things like oil drilling, we are also now ground zero for proposals for new types of technology. And it really struck me earlier, Drew, when you said we have the technology we need to achieve our goals. So how is your agency helping get out ahead of unfavorable pathways? For instance, in transportation, we're seeing proposals for hydrogen, crop-based biofuels. The low carbon fuel standard is something that the EJAC at the Air Resources Board is looking at right now, so definitely top of mind. And in energy generation generally, we have a lot of proposals for carbon capture and sequestration that our community members are very concerned is just perpetuating fossil fuels and increasing the harms that community members are already experiencing.
Well, I'll take the bait and start with the most provocative one, I think, which is sequestration. 10 years ago, if you would have asked me personally, what do I think about sequestration, I'd say terrible idea, for the reasons your question articulated. But today, we've got some money that we're investing in it, and what we're looking at is direct air capture. This is sort of a break glass solution that I think my kids, they're 15 and 16 right now, I hope not, but I fear in 30 years they're gonna look back and say, thanks, Dad, that you participated in this, because we may need all hands on deck. I mean, it's terrifying, and we heard about that from a number of the speakers before. So we want to look at it, bring the costs down, and have it there as available, if needed. Hydrogen, this is a 2-hour conversation easily, and there's strong passions. At the Energy Commission, we try to be as unbiased as possible. All institutions are biased, all human beings are biased, but we really try to just look at the facts as best we can. And I'll just share a couple thoughts. In transportation, look at some of the numbers. Right now, 1.8 million ZEVs in California. Fewer than 15,000 of those are hydrogen vehicles. Shell just pulled out of the market. There's some real challenges, I think, in light-duty vehicles. If you look at storage, that's an opportunity, I think, for hydrogen. It stores really well. Lithium doesn't store for protracted periods. It discharges over a very short cycle. Hydrogen is very flexible and useful. I would just say one thing to think about with hydrogen, per the math that that's been shared with me, if you take 100 kilowatts of electricity produced by solar, let's say, and you put that 100 kilowatts into lithium batteries and you spin wheels, you can get 90 plus kilowatts out of that investment you've made. If you make hydrogen instead, you can't get better than about 40 units. So the penalty you pay is very, very large to produce hydrogen and then go burn it or run it through a fuel cell. So we're still looking at all the applications. There's hard to electrify areas where burning hydrogen, it's got its pluses and minuses, but it might play a role there where high heats are really critical. And then I think finally you mentioned biofuels. The thing I'd say about biofuels is if you look at the cost curves, and we've invested a lot in biofuels at the Energy Commission, we've really tried to make them work. But our clean transportation program that invests about $100 million of ratepayer funds or taxpayer funds in transportation options, we've really shifted away from biofuels. And one of the reasons is if you look at the cost curve, an XY axis of solar, you see in the 1980s the price is up here, and it's just been going steadily downward. If you look at wind, same trajectory. If you look at lithium storage, same trajectory. If you look at biofuels, it's been relatively flat. So, and of course, there's associated issues with combustion and even harvesting methane at dairies and all that sort of thing. So we've moved not away from it completely, but we've shifted quite a bit.
So Drew gave a great answer, and we could leave it at that, but I guess I have to take it just a little bit farther because I think it would be disingenuous if I didn't talk about it, given that I do work on carbon capture, utilization, and storage or sequestration. And I want to be able to have an open dialogue on this because that's what's really important, these direct conversations and getting to have this frank dialogue back and forth and understand different perspectives and where we should be taking this. So, we do have technologies that we need to achieve our clean energy goals. We also need to do more to reach our carbon neutrality goals. And I think what the unknown is there's all these differing needs. We have the technologies available, but do we have all the things that, some of the things that Drew talked about? What are our land use constraints? What are the best technologies, best resources for where you're at? California is very diverse. We've talked about the regional needs, and there will be different solutions for different regions of California. And that's really regional conversations that we need to be having with the communities to understand what solutions work best for them. And in the CARB scoping plan in 2022, they identified that CCUS would be critical for achieving carbon neutrality by 2045. So the work that I'm doing is working with CARB and other agencies who also are playing a very important role in this, in figuring out what can we do with carbon capture, utilization, sequestration. Can this be implemented in California? We think it can, but how should it be implemented in California? I know there's a lot of concerns from communities and stakeholders related to safety, the transportation pipelines, related to the sequestration or storage of that carbon dioxide. Will these reservoirs be safe? Will there be seismic impacts? And these are all questions that we're working on. These are all questions that we've heard and that we've taken back and are thinking about. If we're going to do this in California, these are things that we do need to address. And so I know CCUS is not popular, and especially not popular with this audience, but I would encourage you all to have a conversation with us and help us figure out if this has a place in California, how it gets implemented in California. I want you all to be part of this conversation to help us figure this out and to make sure it's done right. Again, safety is very, very important to us. We don't want to implement something that has safety risks or impacts to communities. So I would just encourage future conversations around this and participation in some of our proceedings and work on this.
Thank you for that, and I definitely appreciate the spirit of dialogue. So CVAC has worked with partners across the state to develop a robust policy platform where we've clearly stated we're not in support of carbon capture, and if it is going to be, thank you, yes. And if it is going to be implemented in our communities, there are a lot of considerations that need to be undertaken. And so similar to our position on the cap and trade program, we want to be able to say no and. Please don't do this. And if you're going to, here are the things that you need to consider. So I really want to thank the panelists for this thoughtful conversation. I definitely learned a lot. And I think, it is critical, the underlying kind of theme, that we do this in a way that is equitable and just. So 2 notes that I want to leave us on as we wrap the panel. I really appreciated the land acknowledgement this morning, and I'm also in solidarity with the movement to give land back to our indigenous communities. Thank you. I also want to recognize that California environmental justice issues are intertwined with injustices that are occurring across the globe as communities struggle for the necessities of life, clean air, water, and land. And our state and national leaders continue to divert resources to war, including funding Israel's bombing and starvation of over 2 million Palestinians. I stand in solidarity with calls for a ceasefire. Thank you all.
Panel, thank you. Thank you so much. Dr. Garoupa, Drew Bohan, and Deputy Secretary Le-Quyen Nguyen. Thank you so much. Now, Maggie, would you come up, please? Is Maggie here? Yes, here she is. Oh, great. Okay. Maggie Tsai is with APEN, and she is the State Political Director. She was raised in the East Bay. Maggie works to advance a vision for a statewide power building centered on justice. Prior to join, you can come up here if you want. Yeah, please. I'll hand over the podium to you as soon as I'm done. Oh, no, you can come up. No, please. Come. I'll just introduce you.
Oh, thank you.
Yes, thank you. Yes. And prior to joining APEN, Maggie worked with labor and community leaders across the country to build electoral power for the Asian immigrant community and working people. So join me in welcoming Maggie.
Thank you so much, Ellie, for that warm welcome, and thank you for my stage missteps. Got a little nervous there because I'm really excited to introduce a really important topic that's been on the top of our minds. Oh, slide and answer. Okay, perfect. Thank you. Do I press? Great. Thank you. I just wanted to say before we have this conversation about climate justice, environmental justice, about folks fighting on the front lines for health and safety buffer zones, for basic access to clean air, water, and land. Our state and national leaders are continuing to siphon funds away from critical domestic climate needs to fund Israel's bombing and starvation for over 2 million Palestinians. I just want to take this moment of silence to reflect on over 31,000 Palestinian mothers, fathers, grandparents, and children who have been killed with our tax dollars to date. I invite everyone here to join me in reflecting on the ways our climate movements can oppose this massacre and urge our representatives to fund climate solutions and care, not killing, and that we are building a livable future for all people on the planet, and so that what we're experiencing here around fighting for setbacks and fighting for healthy, clean air and land and water of our neighborhoods and our communities is also needed around the globe as well. Thank you. And so with that, just wanted to start with our presentation for the campaign for the Safe and Healthy California. So myself, APEN Action is part of the steering committee, as well as other folks, friendly faces here in the audience, Communities for a Better Environment, Physicians for Social Responsibility Los Angeles, PSRLA, who I'm filling in for because Martha cannot be here today, as well as CRPE, Last Chance Alliance, our friends at the Center for Biological Diversity, and then who else am I missing? CEHA and CEHA Action, I cannot forget them. Where's CEHA? And as well as other folks in the Central Valley, and other longstanding environmental justice allies who've been on this fight for a long time. And so, sorry about this. Oh, seems like oh, there we go. Got the clicker to work. Okay, as we know, living near an oil well increases the risk of asthma, respiratory illnesses, high-risk pregnancies, and cancer. Nearly 30,000 oil wells are within half a mile of homes, schools, and other sensitive areas, exposing more than 2.7 million Californians to the most toxic emissions. Most are in low-income communities, and people of color are disproportionately harmed by neighborhood drilling. And the truth is that this is a travesty, because the toxic truth of big oil drilling in our communities is that California is one of the last major oil-producing states without a setback. Even Louisiana and Texas have setbacks, and more than 2.7 million Californians live within 3,200 feet, or a third of a mile of an operational oil and gas well, including nearly 600,000 children. And so these are children and families and our own community members that we are fighting for. And so, because of the folks that I just shouted out earlier, community organizing built into the movement passed SB 1137. Catherine talked about this earlier in the panel that enacted health and safety buffer zones from new oil drilling. So, in 2022, we overwhelmingly passed the law for SB 1137, and it's really due to the hard work of everyone in this room and all the community organizers and the frontline folks who have been in the movement for years, have been fighting for existing, to make sure that we don't live near an oil drill, we don't live near a gas well. And so big oil, I know I'm at time, spent millions of dollars to qualify referendum on the ballot, and we're here to say no to this. We are here to stop the corporate, takeover of the progress that our communities have made. And so the fight to keep SB 1137 is critical to stopping big oil's unchecked greed. And so, we're here today to just let y'all know that there's plenty of ways to plug into the campaign, and that this is a fight we need to take into November on the ballot to keep the law. And this is the law that our legislators, our communities, everyone in this room has already fought for. And then I am out of time, so apologize. But last note is that organize now in your community. Please endorse the campaign. And then Woody Little, who's in the back, right there, Woody, raise your hand, woo! Woody is here on behalf of the campaign and can sign up, get your name on, get your organization to endorse. If you're a C3 organization, you can endorse in this ballot measure. It's critical in November. This is an election year. We need to fight like hell for our communities. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Maggie, Tsai. Great, so a few reminders before we take a break. Please check out the exhibitor booths out in the hall there in the foyer. If you didn't see the bidirectional charging EV this morning, go see it. And I hope that refrigerator is not leaking refrigerants. That would be a problem. Please be back in the room by 10:35 so we can start on time. You'll hear the bells ring. We have a fantastic climate leaders panel coming up. Have a great break.